Hello viewers, welcome to Newsweek South Asia, a program that talks about breeding of terrorism and its impact on South Asian nations. Let's begin with the headlines first. Islamabad's peace intent under scanner as Pak-backed terrorists continue their anti-India operations. Joe Biden says US troop withdrawal from Afghanistan unlikely by May 1. And Khalistani operatives continue to smuggle heroin from Pakistan. On one hand, Pakistan pretends to extend hand of peace, and on the other hand, cross-border terrorism continues to form an essential part of the war-fighting strategy of Pakistan Army. Pakistan Army, which is the virtual ruler of the country, assists terrorists in planning attacks in the valley. Islamabad's peace intent is again under scanner of Indian security agencies after the encounter of 4 Lashkar-e-Taiba terrorists in the region. We have a report.
The Imam Sahib area of South Kashmir's Shopian recently witnessed a fierce exchange of gunfire. 4 Lashkar-e-Taiba terrorists were shot dead by security forces in the ensuing gunfight. The encounter broke out after the security forces were carrying out a search operation in the Manihal area following information about the presence of terrorists. The gun battle lasted for a couple of hours as the terrorists refused to surrender. The slain terrorists were identified as Raid Ahmad, Amir Mir, Raqib Malik and Aftab Wani. Raid had been active in South Kashmir since October last year, while the rest had picked up arms between November and February. This recent encounter of Pak-backed terrorists has completely exposed Islamabad's peace and dialogue offer.
कल इवनिंग में शोपियान पुलिस को एक इत्तला मिली थी कि मनिहाल विलेज में 4 टेररिस्ट छिपे हुए हैं। आर्मी सीआरपी पुलिस कॉर्डन डाली और हम लोग अपील किए। इनफैक्ट उसमें से एक टेररिस्ट के वाइफ को भी ले गए, हम लोग अपील करवाए। बाकी की फैमिली में अपील किए लेकिन सरेंडर नहीं किया और उधर से अंदर से घर के अंदर से फायरिंग किया। फिर इनकाउंटर शुरू हो गया। इनकाउंटर में 4 टेररिस्ट मारे गए। चारों कैटेगराइज टेररिस्ट है, लश्कर-ए-तैयबा से बिलोंग करता है, हालांकि अपने आप को सो कॉल्ड लश्कर मुस्तफा बोलता है।
Pakistan Army Chief recently proposed that India and Pakistan should bury their turbulent past and move forward. But India knows this game too well by now. This is not the first time that Pakistan is proposing a peace plan. The more than 70 years of joint history is replete with instances of doublespeak and treachery by Pakistan. This is why security forces in Jammu and Kashmir are gearing up in advance to conduct the incident-free annual Amarnath pilgrimage beginning June this year.
हम लोग का अपना प्लान बन गया है। कहीं हम लोग नाका को बढ़ा दिए हैं, कहीं कैंप को शिफ्ट कर रहे हैं और जैसा कि हम सब जानते हैं कि इलेक्शन के बाद हम लोग को एडिशनल फोर्स मिल जाएगा और जहाँ सिक्योरिटी का कमी है, जिस एरिया में सिक्योरिटी का कमी है उसको हम प्लग कर लेंगे और बहुत ही सक्सेसफुल सेफ इंसिडेंट फ्री यात्रा करवाएंगे हम लोग, कोई दिक्कत नहीं होगी।
Frustrated Pakistan continues to use its proxies to harm the flourishing grassroots democracy and development in Jammu and Kashmir. On one hand, Pakistan pushes armed terrorists into the valley to disrupt peace in the region, and on the other hand, it emphasizes that there will be no peace in South Asia unless Kashmir is resolved. Moreover, Pakistan's dramatic statements seeking peace with India appear to be part of a larger strategy on the part of Pakistani leadership to placate the international community. This has been an old ploy Islamabad has been adopting for years. Recently, on the occasion of Pakistan Day celebrations at the Pakistan High Commission, Pakistani diplomat Aftab Hassan Khan replayed "Resolve all issues through dialogue" statement. He stated that both India and Pakistan should resolve issues including Jammu and Kashmir through dialogue.
The new charge d'affaires statement, I think, is a big joke. It's a joke for the countries who are hearing it, and it's a joke by Pakistan itself. And I think it's a very poor joke because the first step that is there is stopping of terrorists coming into the neighboring countries who are trained by Pakistan. Pakistan ISI is the one who is running those training centers, and ensuring infiltration into India, into Sri Lanka, into Nepal, and into other neighboring countries of SAARC.
Pakistan's baseless claim over Kashmir has been an unfulfilled dream. The Islamic Republic has failed in creating an anti-India rhetoric among the youth of Jammu and Kashmir. This is why Islamabad is attempting to rewrite the story of terrorism in the valley, but the vigilant security forces in India will never let it happen.
The air of deep uncertainty that has for so long dominated Afghanistan does not seem to disappear soon. While the United States is looking to keep troops in Afghanistan past a May 1 deadline, Taliban stand firm on the February 2020 peace agreement, asking the US to strictly adhere to the mutually agreed deadline. Meanwhile, Afghanistan is witnessing a constant surge in the violence with no clear end in sight for a war that has turned into a stalemate. Have a look.
The United States began a war in Afghanistan with an aim to rid the country of Al-Qaeda's threat and topple the Taliban's regime weeks after the Al-Qaeda killed almost 3,000 people in the 9/11 terror attacks. 2 decades later, Joe Biden now faces an anguishing choice over whether to withdraw the last US troops from Afghanistan by May 1st. Biden now says meeting the May 1 deadline for troop withdrawal will be tough as per the deal made during the Donald Trump administration. But he also predicts US forces will not stay in the country much longer.
It's going to be hard to meet the May 1 deadline. Just in terms of tactical reasons, it's hard to get those troops out. So what we've been doing, what I've been doing, and what Secretary Blinken has been doing we've been meeting with our allies, those other nations that have NATO allies who have troops in Afghanistan as well. And if we leave, we're going to do so in a safe and orderly way. But it is not my intention to stay there for a long time. But the question is, how and in what circumstances do we meet that agreement that was made by President Trump to leave under a deal that looks like it's not being able to be worked out to begin with? How's that done? But we are not staying a long time.
Biden's comments came after Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin made an unannounced visit to Afghanistan earlier this week and held talks with Afghan President Ashraf Ghani. The two sides condemned the increase in violence in the war-battered country and stressed that lasting peace is the main solution for the current situation in Afghanistan.
You know, that process of reviewing conditions that have been met or not met is ongoing, and as you've seen with our efforts in Doha, and so I don't care to comment on that. I won't comment on that. But what I will say is that it's obvious that the level of violence remains pretty high in the country. We really like to see that violence come down, and I think if it does come down, it can begin to set the conditions for, some really fruitful diplomatic work.
There has been a surge in violence, with the Taliban continuing to carry out attacks targeting government leaders, security forces, and civilians. A recent UN report indicated 3,035 civilian deaths and 5,785 injuries during 2020, with the Taliban held responsible for almost 45% of casualties. Observers also say that the Taliban have not yet pledged to cut ties to Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups threatening, as the February 2020 agreement called for. Meanwhile, the Taliban has warned there would be severe consequences if Washington did not stick to the agreed timetable, further raising pressure on the fragile peace process.
We had 18 months of negotiation with the Americans, and they agreed that they will withdraw in 14 months. And the time is now going to end. at the end of April and 1st of May. And they should go. Because if they do not go at the end of April, that means they continue. After that, it will be a kind of a violation of the agreement. That violation would not be from our side, but it would be from their side. So, in that case, if there is action, of course there will be reaction.
The reality is, whether or not President Biden withdraws all U.S. forces by May 1 in accordance with the U.S. Taliban agreement of February 2020, Afghanistan is likely to spiral into more violence. There are reports that Ghani has already rejected the U.S. administration's new peace plan that calls for an interim government and will soon be announcing a counter-proposal that calls for a democratic procedure with new elections in the next 6 months. But the Taliban immediately rejected Ghani's proposal, terming it as scandalous.
Pakistan has always tried to revive the issue of Khalistan, a separatist movement that is long dead. Through various means and strategies, Islamabad tries to instigate Sikh youth in India and abroad with the objective of spoiling their future. Narco-terrorism is one such means. On various occasions, Indian security forces have successfully busted the narco-terror module of Pakistan. Recently, the National Investigative Agency filed a charge sheet against 7 Khalistani operatives involved in park bag smuggling.
In June 2019, 2 bikers at a bus stop in Amritsar threw a bag when stopped during regular checking. The cops recovered a bag and seized hand grenades and a mobile phone from it. Investigations later revealed that the 2 accused, Jajbir Singh Samra and Varinder Singh Chahal, were part of a narco-terror module involved in distributing the heroin smuggled from Pakistan. They were working on the directions of Pakistan-based terrorist Harmeet Singh alias PhD. Now, in a major development, the National Investigation Agency has filed charges against 7 alleged Khalistani operatives in this hand grenade seizure case.
The sources of terror funding have always been things like smuggling, like drugs, like black marketing, and so on and so forth. So we need to remember that, the possible, and we have to be careful about this, the possible re-emergence of terrorism in Punjab, spearheaded by these Khalistanis, with this very dangerous development of grenades being discovered, is almost certainly funded by the drug money that you see floating around in Punjab, because as you know, Punjab has a huge drug problem. There's almost no doubt about it that this is also being funded by Pakistan.
The Punjab has not experienced a surge in terror activities in the recent years. There is no doubt that from time to time, some Khalistani elements show their presence in the state. The nexus between Khalistani groups, ISI and smugglers are raising drug money to support militancy in Punjab while destroying the youth with drug addiction. Recent arrests point to Pakistan's game plan of reviving the Khalistan movement by using the local criminal network in India. Moreover, Indian security agencies have, in recent months, seen increased activity along the international border in Punjab, with the delivery of drugs increasing. Notorious ISI and pro-Khalistani groups are using drones to make such deliveries possible across the border. According to the report, Pakistan's bigger plans of narco-terrorism released by South Asia Democratic Forum, seizing of drugs by Indian security forces, signifies increasing actions by drug merchants in each quantitative and qualitative phrases. Moreover, it exhibits Pakistan's larger plans to hold out disruptive actions in India.
We've seen this in Canada, we've seen this in the UK. There's significant intersectionality now between the Khalistan lobby and the ISI, mainly through the Pakistani expatriate community. And what we've seen, of course, is the fact that before, what used to happen in the 80s and 90s was that the ISI used to pay Khalistanis to carry out acts of terror. Today, it's the other way around. One part of this deal has been that a corridor that's been given almost as a quid pro quo for funding Pakistani covert activities.
When Pakistan could not succeed in its nefarious designs by sending terrorists and weapons, it hatched a conspiracy to smuggle drugs into India. However, Indian security forces are vigilant enough to bust such narco-terror modules formed by Pakistan and its agencies. Islamabad should understand that it cannot achieve its goal of forming a separate Khalistan either through conventional war or through other conspiracies.
The rapid advancement in digital technology has acted like a boon for the process of globalization. But for some, it has become a weapon for spreading the wings of terrorism. Terrorist groups like the Islamic State, Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Taliban, to name a few, have been using the social media and their digital publications to influence youth and lure them towards jihad. Several reports and research papers have time and again highlighted the interlink between the cyberspace, Islamist radicalization and terror financing that is aimed at expanding the outreach of extremist ideologies among the gullible youth and collect funds for their malicious deeds. We have a report.
From the expansion of extremist groups and their worldwide recruitment policies, it has become evident that the threat of terrorism is not restricted to its region of origin anymore. The mass use of the internet and social media has obscured the borders of extremism and has imposed an undeniable menace to global peace. Terrorist organizations are now invading cyberspace and turning it into a battleground. They no longer rely on military force such as weapons, armor, and bombs only. Instead, they have become more and more savvy, and their strategies and tactics have gained technological orientation.
One should note that terrorist organizations, like other organizations across the world, always use every means possible for exploiting the space for their own ends. In the case of terrorist organizations, cyberspace was a medium which they have been very active for the past decade or so. And today, with the social media and other media coming on board, this medium has been completely exploited by them for their own nefarious ends.
The technology proficiency of terrorist organizations is on a swift rise. A report by the European Foundation for South Asian Studies, or EFSAS, in June 2020 discussed that information sharing has assisted in the dissemination of extremist beliefs across the globe at a faster pace and has appeared as an important tool in the radicalization of individuals and their subsequent recruitment as terrorists. The report highlighted the fact that owing to the accessibility, availability, affordability, and wide reach of social media forums, terrorist organizations have progressively taken advantage of these platforms to convey their agenda and achieve their goals. Terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, Lashkar-e-Taiba, Islamic State, and Taliban are at the forefront of using the internet for their recruitment and expansion purposes worldwide. Besides, recent years have revealed a scary, dangerous new era in which not only adults but teenagers are being recruited to plot and carry out terrorist attacks.
Youths can be very easily influenced by new ideas and new ideologies. They do not have the experience and the exposure of what these actual impact of the new ideas and ideologies can be in the real world. Thus, terrorist groups and other extremist organizations try to influence the youth and wean them away from the mainstream path towards their cause. Also, the youth can be very useful as the soldiers of a terrorist organizations.
The Pak-backed terror groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba, through its political arm Jamaat-ud-Dawa and more precisely its cyber unit, called JUD Cyber Team have also started using social media channels to attract young disenfranchised men. In a similar pattern to ISIS, the JUD Cyber Team has provided links to a computer game titled Age of Jihad, which promoted the organization's objectives. According to intelligence reports, fake videos of alleged atrocities committed by the security forces and building a false narrative are now often used by the ISI handlers from Pakistan to whip up emotions among the young recruits. It was found that out of 131 youth recruited in India's Jammu and Kashmir into terrorism in 2020, 102 belonged to an age group of 16 to 25 years and 29 were above 25 years. In January 2021, 2 terrorists arrested in Kashmir were provided training online using various links available on public platforms like YouTube and were receiving orders as well as religious teachings from Pakistan-based handler Burhan Hamza. Earlier, Amir Siraj, a final-year graduation student from Khwaja Gilgit in Sopore, was also recruited online by Jaish-e-Mohammed. He was gunned down during an encounter between terrorists and security forces.
Now that the Indian Army has got a very strong infiltration grid on the line of control and other security forces on the international border, it is very difficult for Pakistan to infiltrate terrorists from across. As also the recent agreement on ceasefire violations has further reduced the possibility. However, Pakistan's ISI and other agencies are now going to use the cyber medium, online media, social media to influence the Kashmiri youth to join terrorism and carry out terrorist activities. For funding, they are also likely to use the new currency such as cryptocurrency, which has been used by the ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
Apart from radicalization, a wide range of terrorist groups, including Hamas, Lashkar-e-Taiba, Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, and Al-Qaeda, have also used the internet to raise and transfer funds needed to support their activities. They have relied on sophisticated cyber tools, including the solicitation of cryptocurrency donations from around the world. This trend is only likely to increase as the scope and scale of the internet expands and with other related technological developments. However, not all terror groups have yet achieved significant and widespread breakthroughs with cryptocurrencies and other mediums of online funding. Hence, when terrorist groups do innovate with fundraising, efforts to counter the financing of terrorism must also change with the times.
And with that, we come to the end of this edition of Newsweek South Asia. We'll be back next week with more news, views and analysis from the subcontinent. Meanwhile, do keep writing to us at nwsa@nin.com. This is Shreya Savijay signing off on the behalf of entire production team of Newsweek South Asia. Goodbye and take care.